Today on What Went Wrong, we break some without actually breaking. Hi, I'm Brett Mauser, and I've made over 40 feature films, and most of them are action films. And when you do action films, you have some crazy stuff go down. You always have fights or gunplay, things like that. But you want to make it look like our characters are actually in danger. But when you're on set, you don't want them to actually be in danger.
What's the fun in that?
I know. So today we're going to talk about stunts, and we're joined by KeeKee Soki, who has done his fair share of stunt work.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you've done.
I formally started doing stunt work with Janelle Smith in Iron Dragon Studios in Austin, Texas. I've worked with Angel Mist Productions and a few other stunt choreographers, Troy, Larry, and a couple other people. But yeah, I've worked on probably about 10 different movies doing stunt films. So done stunt work and stunts. So
now, my experience with stunts, I mean, I used to, all the way back in high school, we did our own stuff. We were 18, 19-year-old idiots running around, throwing ourselves out windows.
17-year-old idiots.
Yeah. And we had my original first stunt man was, and I still got him. He's a little monkey called Mongo, a little monkey about this big, and we dress him up, put him in clothes, and throw him out windows and out of cars and stuff like that. And then we evolved into getting shot ourselves, falling down. And I remember in the Innocent Saga, we had a scene where a girl was supposed to jump out of a hallway, turn around, fire a couple shots, and land. We had a mattress down. And she was a little intimidated. She's not a stunt person by any stretch of the imagination. So I took it on, upon myself. Only show her how it's done and how she has to not have to worry about anything. So I do the stunt and I fly back and I forget to tuck my neck.
oh no,
And for 2 weeks.
the springs jam the neck.
Yep. So it's definitely something you have to be careful about.
Yes.
Now, of course, for legal reasons, we should say we don't suggest or recommend anybody do anything without training, and that what you'll learn here today is not necessarily should be taken as an educational experience. We're just talking about our personal experiences. So don't take something that we're doing and going out and trying it. Like we've done episodes where we've accidentally electrocuted people before. Don't do that.
That's why this thing is called What Went Wrong.
What went wrong?
Yeah.
Don't do the part that went wrong, because that's the whole idea. If we want to do, we'll do a series called What Went Right, and that's the stuff you can do.
So with that in mind, can you think of any stunts that you were a part of that didn't quite go the way they were supposed to?
I could say one specifically, which was actually not that long ago. We were filming on Washington's Armor in Dallas, and we went through probably 2.5 weeks of stunt training, going over it. So we were Mingo warriors running down this hill, and we had to run across this water ravine, and it just rained for like 3 days. So as we're running down the hill, it wasn't even me, it was one of the other stunt people. They hit the mud, and like legs went up in the air, and their whole body went into the water first. And it's just things you can't account for. I don't care how much training you do, the elements around you really take its own course sometimes.
Physics is going to win every time.
Yeah, there are times where you're not even participating in a stunt and something happens you weren't there on that one, but we had a scene in Tag Conspiracy where Nikki Young, who plays Maggie, is just running towards the door. The door doesn't open, and she turns around and she leans against the door to as she breaks down and whimpers, and the door opens up.
Of course,
Little things like that can lead to an injury on set.
Absolutely.
In the Night Watchman, we were in rehearsals of a scene where we were working out the fight choreography, and it was a leg swipe, and an actress was supposed to jump up and miss it, but he caught her leg, and she went right down on her tailbone as well. In those instances, as an independent filmmaker and whatnot, your priority now becomes that person. make sure they're okay. Like my stunt choreographer at that time was like, oh, she just walk it off, she'll be fine. I'm like, nope. She goes to the hospital, she gets checked out, here's
all
her insurance,
halt
yeah.
on set.
Yeah. And it's what you do. And to admit, yes, there are times where you're on set and you're like, oh God, I gotta get this done. But you have to be responsible.
Absolutely.
And you have to put a stop on it and say, okay, let's make sure everyone's okay and everything's good to go. Yeah. And then and then move forward.
Yeah.
Instances like like Nikki, it's like you have to make sure that she's okay. When she gives you the okay, you can move forward, but make sure that everything's okay, and then double check with her several days afterwards. Hey, how are things going? How are things holding up? Are you okay? Have you ever worked with the opposite end of that, where you've had maybe, and you don't have to say any names or anything, but an instance where you didn't feel safe on a set?
I have. We were working with a local film producer, and he's one of those guys that is just like, tough it up, and oh, you're supposed to be a stunt guy. You can take it, like, just pick it up and keep going. And when you hit your head on the ground and get a little slight concussion and you're sitting there dizzy, the last thing you want to do is run and flip over a table again and be trying to fire at people, and people are kicking at you, and you're going through this, of course, stunts, you're doing 10, 15 takes sometimes to get it just right on point. Yeah. And it's just like, okay, do I really want to do this? And that was like really the determination for me, whether if I wanted to be a full stream actor or be just a stunt actor. And I did enough films being a stunt actor where it's just like, yeah, I'd rather just be the character. I'll get a stuntman to do my scenes for me if I have to. But yeah, I mean, stunts are cool. They're fun, as long as it's done safely. When you're starting to do things on wires and mm-hmm. getting to the higher elements of things, it gets a little scary.
Yeah, and it can seem like, oh, it's just the wires. Oh, that'll be cool. It's safe. There's a lot behind that yes. you're not realizing, because most filmmakers aren't, physicists. They don't understand mm-hmm. physics. You can tell that by their gunfights.
Well, I don't know if you've ever been strapped to a wire and jerked mm-hmm. in a scene, but your neck and your back hurt a couple mm-hmm. days after that, after taking those jerks, and it's just like, oh man, I can't take too many of these, and you're doing 3 or 4 takes, and it's mm-hmm. just like, oh man,
one
yeah.
after the other, yeah.
Now there have been times, maybe turn this around on the opposite end of that, where you may have a director that's too fidgety or too paranoid,
yes.
too sensitive, which I have had which I've done in the past. There was a scene in Innocent Saga that comes to mind where a stuntman went through a table. And it was just supposed to be a general fight, and he comes up and says, "Let me do this. I want to do this." And he's a pro. He's a great stuntman. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I don't know. Is this going to be okay? And he's the professional. Sometimes and it winds up being a perfectly safe stunt. Yeah. But sometimes you have to convince the director, no, this is safe. It's okay. And I as a director have to rely on the professional, on the person who's yes. doing this and knows what they're doing. Have you ever had to talk somebody into letting you do a stunt?
Not so much, because I think that I've worked with enough people in our things. I've wanted to do more, where they wouldn't let me do more than I wanted to do outside of the choreography. But for the most part, it's always been to exactly the way that we've planned, especially the bigger film production companies that I've worked with, the Copernicum Studios and things like that. They were really proficient about having the stunt choreographer there and making sure that his stunt people knew exactly what they were supposed to do when they were supposed to do it. But there was, for an example, we did a stunt, but they changed it. So I was living in San Antonio. I was here in San Antonio, and I wasn't there for like 2 days of training. They changed it while I was gone. So then when I get there, they're like, "Oh, well, you're gonna pick this guy up and fire him and carry him and slam him into a tent." Well, this guy has never been picked up and slammed before. So I was telling Jim, I was like, when I slam you, I'm really going to whip you, right? And he was just like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, I can take it. I'm like, are you sure? And most people that have never even been in a real full contact fight don't understand what it's to be whipped down. You know, I used to do WWE style wrestling.
Yeah.
So when you're in the ring and you're taking bumps from guys that are 6'5", 200-something pounds, and they go and choke slam you, and your body hits that mat and it bounces and your whole body jerks, like that torque and force, even though it's set up, is a lot.
Yeah.
Normal people don't go through those moments.
Yeah.
You can't fake the physics.
Yeah.
When you get thrown into something, you're actually getting thrown into something, and there's a certain amount of force equals mass times acceleration. So you change these forces, and so you accelerate, and then you hit this thing, and how much you weigh, and how much it weighs, and how much. And so whether or not you're doing a WWE fight or you're in a bar fight, the amount of force imparted on your anatomy is exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's add more to that. You're in full war paint with the tomahawk in your hand running at somebody, and they've never seen or been in a moment like that in their life, and the real fear sets in when you see somebody running at you.
Yeah.
Right? So then you pick this person up and you slam them in this tent, and their legs literally pancake over their head, and they're just like in shock. They're just sitting there like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
You know?
That's the thing that practice. Talk about this practice. Talk about practice training. Whenever you have anything, whether it's driving a car, flying a plane, doing a stunt, whatever it is, okay, you cannot forsake your training. You can't. You just can't.
Absolutely.
You know, if you're going to come up and they're going to say, well, we changed the stunt. Says, well, we're going to have to practice that stunt, kids. I can't just, well, it's okay. There may be some stuff that I've done 100 times. Let's say I have picked up a person and slammed them into a tent 100. Let's just say 100 times. Okay. However, I've not picked up that person and slammed them into that tent before.
Yes.
Okay. I like to put it in my own world. Just because I know how to do this piece of machinery does not mean I can do the same thing with this new piece of machinery.
Just because Steve Trevor flew a 1917 airplane doesn't mean he can fly an F-16 in 1984.
Exactly.
I'm not saying, I'm not calling anything in particular.
Oh, I will. There's a big difference between those two aircraft. Trust me. You know, there's a huge difference between a freaking biplane and a modern, Generation 4 fighter. I'm just saying. So, no, you can't forsake your training ever, because when you do, that's when bad things happen.
Yes,
and it's not because you're not a professional. It's not because you don't know what you're doing. It's because training is essential to safety.
True.
That's why I would recommend that anybody that directs a film gets his ass kicked at least once or twice. Because I think that, growing up, in Dallas, I was the nerd. So I got my ass whooped all the time. So I know what violence feels like. And that's why when you have these, in modern day, from political sides, you have calls for violence. It's like because you don't know what violence is.
True.
Those calls for violence, you've never experienced it, so you don't know what you're calling for.
And I will tell you one benefit, like for me, even though we didn't train that stunt, and he might have been a new person, I had a benefit that my dad was a red belt in judo, so we trained a lot of judo. So when somebody gets stiff on you or the variables set in, we know how to move and torque the body a certain way to manipulate that person at all means necessary.
And we'll see, so the proficiency of this one individual or that one individual may differ. And so you as a director may have someone who has done all kinds of stuff. But you may have someone over here who has not.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that they're not proficient in what they're doing. Like I said, I've done stage combat. I was in the military for 10 years. I've done lots and lots of hand-to-hand stuff. But I'm not going to have the stage combat training. His type of stage combat training. I've done, I've done heavy fighting. I've done swords and stuff like this. But if I do kung fu somebody, I don't know what I'm doing there. I mean, not actually doing it. You know what I'm saying? And so, whereas you as a director may have this dude who has had, 20 years in the military as a hand-to-hand combat instructor. He's all this, that, and the other thing. And you got this guy over here who's judo and been in the film industry for, let's just say, 10 years.
Yeah. So
this guy's got twice the experience this guy has. Well, no, that's not true. You know, yes, he may have more time doing this particular thing than he has time doing this particular thing. But at the end of the day, you want someone to be picked up and thrown into a tent as opposed to, you know, coming over the wall and being killed by a, you know, special forces operations guy.
Yeah.
You need this guy. And so just because dude's got 20 years of experience, 50 years of experience, 5 years, whatever, you have to understand that what you're asking someone to do may or may not be in their wheelhouse.
Sure.
And if you ask someone to do something that's not in their wheelhouse, because stunt guys and professionals, we want to get the job done. Mission first, mission always. We want to get this thing done. We want to do it well for you. So we're going to try. Okay. But physics are physics, and the body's going to react a certain way. And you need to not forsake your training.
Yes.
And even if that's just run through the thing once, twice, 3 times, 5 times, until, you know, whatever. Don't just say, we're changing the thing. You know what you're doing, right, Bill? Go.
Well, that's the thing. Like for me, when I was a martial artist first,
Yeah.
before I did stunt training, so I had to learn how to make sure I wasn't hurting that person
All right.
before, you know, especially when you're doing training and things like that, because your back fundamentals kick in when your adrenaline kicks in, and you go back to the reality side of things sometimes, and it's really hard to flip that switch off.
Yeah, it's like when we were shooting Dog's Life. We had a scene where one of our characters was supposed to shoot an officer, a police officer, and we were fortunate enough to be able to, I don't want to say rent officers, but they were there to protect the set as well as, hey, will you be in the movie? Yeah, okay, we'll be in the movie. And shooting from behind them. And as DeMarcus pulls out the gun and does the shot, we only did like 2 or 3 takes, but especially from behind, you can see that officer still flinching for his gun.
Yeah.
That's why I only did 2 takes. I didn't want to do a third because I didn't want to dull his reflexes. That if he left our set and went somewhere else and ran into a robbery, now his instincts are dulled. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And plus he wasn't, you know, he's not a professional actor or anything. So that instinct is there, and you have to curb it. And I can't remember when it was who it was. Somebody. It was a documentary I saw recently where it was somebody explaining that they were in a fight in a film, and he said, I had to realize that person wasn't fighting me.
Yes.
He was fighting his own instinct to kill me.
Yes.
And that's why when you get somebody who knows what they're doing as an actual, you know, I don't want to say an actual killer, but somebody who's actually trained in that way, they have to, you know,
Turn it off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Good.
Okay, so like I said, the training, like you were in martial arts for 10, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, how many years.
Yeah.
And I was in the Army for 10, 20, whatever, 10 years. And the training that I received, combat training, completely different than what he did. Whereas yours was, what was it, judo?
Well, no, my dad was red belt in judo. I did taekwondo, but then we did North Korean style jungle fighting,
Okay.
which was an after hours fighting
I may
class.
have actually learned that from somebody.
So yeah, so I mean, this is throat gouging, you know, eye pokes, you know, tearing off ears, you know, like brutality,
And see, we just
killer
saw-
instinct stuff.
We just have that with the Katusa, that's a different concept. But anyway, yeah, so he's learned the martial arts aspect, which has a different purpose than, say, somebody who's been in the military, because the stuff we were learning was actually a lot less form than more function, but a completely different world. And you have someone who, say, has learned kendo, which is the Japanese sword, completely different form of martial arts. And so they may all have this, and of course, like I said, I learned when I was in Europe, I learned, you know, sword fighting, heavy fighting, and so that was a completely different form of the martial art. And so just because you have someone on your set as a director who I'm a martial artist for whatever, and that's great, okay, because learning the martial art will teach you to maneuver your body in a certain way that you will then try to conform to what the director wants. And that's the idea. Okay. But like, say, Matt Hasso, what Matt Hasso would do for your film, and what you would do for your film, and what I would do for the film are 3 completely different things, because I don't know how to do the hand-to-hand stuff that looks good. I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to that. Okay, if it was a hand-to-hand fight with me, I'm basically going to hurl myself at them, stick a bayonet in their throat, and we're going to go on our merry way. Not exciting, not cool. This has nothing to do with anything.
Yes.
Okay, The same thing with the gunfights. You want me to have a gunfight? Great, I'll show you a gunfight. Unfortunately, they did look terrible for the movie, which is we had to have a little come to Jesus, and that's an old story. But the job of the stuntman is to provide his service and maneuver his body and other people's bodies, if you will, to the will of the director to make the film present and tell the story that the director wants. But the director has to understand, you can use your fine china to dig in the garden. You can. It's not a very good use for it, and you'll probably break it, but it'll do it.
Yeah.
But why would you do that when there are actual tools built for that? Like a shovel and a pick, so you need to use the correct tool for the job that you want to have done. And you need to know that as a director.
And you also have to keep in mind that an expert is not an expert filmmaker, stuntman, or what have you. Because I've worked with there's one of our producers is very knowledgeable in horses, and he thinks that because he knows everything about horses, anybody we put on a horse is going to be that's easy to do.
Yes.
No, they're going to fall off and break their ass.
Yes.
And it's like, well, he's just trotting. It's like, no, but you've got to understand this is so. You've got to keep an eye on your experts and your professionals as well, and be able to pull them back, because they're going to want to do crazy stuff, and you got to say, no, look, our insurance doesn't cover that.
You must set the parameters of what you expect from the people on your set, your stuntmen, your actors, and you must sit down with everyone. Table reads are good for that kind of thing.
Yes.
Dry runs are really good for that thing before you throw live ammo in it. Not real live ammo, but before you go, the crawl, walk, run idea, which the military, if you understand. When you get on set, let's walk through everything. And you get everybody together. And I'm like, okay. We used to do what's called sand tables whenever we were doing an operation, and we'd have a big table of sand basically, and here we are, here's where we're going, and here's what's coming this direction. So and we would stand over this thing, and we'd have the pointer, and all right, and then we'd go off to the side, and we'd bunch up. Of course, we're not in the real life, but we're going to bunch up. It's okay, and we'd all do little baby steps. We're going to do this, and then what are you going to do? You'd walk through this whole thing, and you'd rehearse it, you'd practice, and you'd rehearse and practice stuff we've done hundreds of times. Strack lanes we talked about, platoon offense, defense. I know we've had those conversations. Stuff that I've done hundreds of times, stuff that I knew how to do in my sleep. We all did.
Yes.
But every time we're going to do it, crawl, walk, run. We step through it. Well, your actors, by virtue of them being actors, are probably doing something new. Yeah. Because this is a new movie, a new experience. Even if you have a super experienced stuntman who knows exactly what he's doing, and exactly what he's supposed to do, and exactly where he's going to do everything he's going to do. You may have an actor who's not the super experienced stuntman. Yes. And so, the super experienced stuntman is going to take your actor and roll him around and throw him over the fence, which would be awesome. Okay. And have you ever picked up someone thrown over a fence? Yes. Have you ever been picked up thrown over a fence? Absolutely. So everyone knows what they're doing, right? But guess what? You still need to crawl, walk, run. You need to, here's what we're going to do. Because, like you said, in the heat of the moment, in the passion of everything happening, adrenaline does what it does. If you run through it, you remove some of that. Yes. You take some of it away. The reason we practice stuff we've done over and over again is because when bullets start flying, we get really juiced. But you're going to revert to your training. You're going to revert to what you've learned. You're going to revert to what you have been doing. And so when, the guy with the war pants coming at you with the hatchet, you're not going to go, wah! You're like, oh, here comes the guy with the hatchet. 1001, 1002, 1003, I do this, he does that, I do this, he does, and then it's an A, then B, then C, then D, and hoopsie daisy blammo, all right? And you've practiced it, and what was that movie? I can't think of it now, but they were talking through the operation they were doing by a little sing-songy things. Yeah. And we've done that. It sounds dumb, but if it's dumb and it works, it's not dumb.
I don't know if you've ever heard of the strategy prime for error.
Yeah.
So, within the realms of that, if people watching don't know what that means, is working the error strategy of going through what could go wrong first before you even go the right direction. Yeah. That way, your mind is already formatted around what could go wrong. Mm-hmm. So you just don't do that, and that helps out tremendously, especially with a lot of stunt stuff. Because, if you're doing a stunt with somebody, and let's say you're disarming this person, or you're coming and you're turning their body and you're going to throw them over your shoulder, and they don't, so let's say they have a bayonet in their arms and they don't let go of that bayonet, and they happen to throw down onto the ground and that bayonet stabs themselves, or the rifle hits them, or they land on their back on the rifle, and they could have easily just let go and toss that to the side. But that's an error that's not necessarily accounted for when you're doing your rehearsal or your training.
You also have to, as a director, have situational awareness about your cast, and you. I'm sure you probably run into something that I'm about to talk about, where you're on set and there's a gung ho guy, and you know when you step on set, this guy's dangerous. This guy's going to get someone hurt, and you can feel that. If you're paying attention, and I've been on sets where I'm like, oh, this guy wants to put somebody through a wall, and it's like, listen to your gut when it comes to that, and calm them down, and
rehearsals can help that.
Yeah, and there's just going to be times where you just realize that this guy shouldn't be a stuntman. He's just too overzealous. He's too gung ho, and he doesn't have that restraint. And you've got to keep an eye on that and diffuse that situation. It happens. It's happened on my sets. So it can happen to anybody's. It's not like we're,
And the reality of that is it doesn't even have to be a man. I've worked with females that have been on set where, oh, yes, I can do this. Okay, well, you're going to put your hand on this object before you hit your head on this object. Make sure, oh, yeah, I got it. And then they got this cut on their forehead. And you're just like, I thought you said you got this.
There's another thing. I guess this is more of a technique advice you could give to somebody. Something we used to do in stage fighting and say heavy fighting was a safe word. One of them was hold. It was whenever something happens, whenever we would be armored up and whacking away at each other, completely covered in armor and steel and leather and everything else. If something were to happen, like the weapon you had were to get knocked out of your hand and all of a sudden your fingers you're just hanging out meanwhile things are flying around, you would yell hold very loudly, and whenever someone heard hold, they would yell hold, and everybody would yell hold. And typically what we would do is if we're doing something, we'd all stop right where we are, and the blades would go up. And we just stop, just quit moving immediately. Whatever you're doing, if you're right in the middle of something, you pull everything back and you just sit like that. And then once you figured out what was wrong, then you'd reset. Okay, reset everybody, and then you could do it again. And I know some people get worried about, well, I didn't want to stop things, I didn't want to screw things up. Believe me, if you see something that you thought you saw but you didn't actually see it and you call the hold for no reason, we would much, 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 much rather have a false hold than someone not call it, and then someone gets injured.
Absolutely. And I worked on a film set not too long ago where you have 30 actors in a full combat situation, Romans versus barbarians, and everybody's going crazy, and you hear the director, cut, 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 but it's so loud, and there's so much battle going on, and everybody's adrenaline is going, that they don't stop. And it's just like, what's going on? This is real. Everything becomes real, And that was the first time working on a set where, you have 4 or 5 people coming at you. And you realize, like, oh, I was born in the wrong era. Like, you're just like, oh, this is so fun, yes.
I love this.
And then, and I didn't grow up doing reenactment stuff. I've been on fields and stuff where I've seen it happen where, like, again, incidents happens. Halt! And everybody freezes. And it's just like mannequins on set, But it's just because there's that one person that fell down that's getting trampled, or a situation that could happen.
Hurt their ankle, or something happened, their sword came out of their hand. Yeah. And you need to have something. Something. I don't care what it is, but something.
You try to be as safe as you can on set. But I will say to anybody, whether it's just that actress who just has to do that one punch, or whether it's somebody who's seasoned professional, is I will say, when I'm doing an action film to the people, look, we're going to be as safe as we can. But understand that things happen. And usually, and what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about like impalements or anything like that. But sometimes an actor's going to come a little too close. I've been hit 3 times. My nose is broken all the way back in '95. Scott McCroskey hit Zach
Punched
on
what's
the
his name right in the face.
and it happens. Sometimes it's just a little plunk. Sometimes it's I came too close. You've got to get that fear out of your head that, I'm going to get punched. And can I get punched? Am I going to get punched? Get that out of your head, because that can be more dangerous.
Yes.
Because if you're fearful of that and don't accept the fact, I could get punched in this.
Yeah.
Now, that's different from doing a sword fight where you are, when you've got these real blades, which you shouldn't be using real blades,
Yes.
but,
Well, they're still
if
metal
there's the
blades.
things,
I mean,
yeah.
they're blunted blades, but they're still a
Yeah,
metal
because
blade.
you can hit something and a piece of
Yeah.
shrapnel can come off, or because you have different swords. Don't go down to the flea market and get a katana and start, even though it's dull,
absolutely
to
do
start
not do
hitting
that.
those, because
They'll break.
the
They're
swords,
made of pot steel.
Yeah, you have to go to an actual sword manufacturer that makes combat swords.
Yes.
Because you can't have that chipping. There's how many people have crossed those swords and a piece of shrapnel comes and hits somebody in the eye, and now they're blind in one eye.
Yes. And as an actor, please do not ever, ever hesitate to practice.
Yes.
And if you feel uncomfortable with something, don't do it.
And as a director, and even in my release forms, I say, if you ever feel uncomfortable, and that's in my release form, if you feel comfortable, if we ask you to do something you're not comfortable with, tell us. We will figure something else out.
And once again, the run-throughs, the training can figure that out. You may have an actress, let's say, we talked about one who was shooting a gun and never shot a gun before. And so she didn't know what she was doing when it comes to that. So she knew that she was going to have to be this person who used a gun. So she actually went and got some training.
Yes.
Fantastic. You may have an actress who's never thrown a punch, never gotten hit, okay? And she's going to look like has that trepidation and that fear of doing it. So you got to practice until the idea of being hit is replaced by the idea of doing this, as we call it, combat ballet, if you will, where you're standing there and it's the talk through. They do this, I do that. They do this, I do that. And so you replace the thing of getting hit with now she's a part of this dance move and maneuver, whatever else, and she knows how to do it. And so you get the action you're looking for, you get the reaction you're looking for.
Yeah.
Training. Run through. And so, but once again, actors, actresses need to understand, if you're on an action movie, there's going to have to be some action in it.
Absolutely.
And action involves movement, kinetic energy being what it is. Things could happen, things could go sideways. You as a director need to assuage their fears best you can. And you can do that with the training and the run-throughs. Have them talk to the experts. Yeah. When you have KeeKee's who's there and you want them to do whatever, and you've got an actor, I'm not really sure. And you can say, KeeKee, come here, man. So-and-so has a problem with the blibbity-blabbity. Could you go, this little situation? And you're going to go, okay, here's what we're doing. And you could sit there and explain to them in full, complete, and gory detail how it's going to work, what's going to happen, and tell them, okay, this could go wrong, and here's how we're going to handle that. This could go wrong, and here's how we're going to handle that. And then we're going to do this and this and this, and let's run through it 20 times. Yeah. Until you feel comfortable with it. And that's why you have the experts. That's why you have the guys who've been doing it.
And that's the thing. Depending upon how much budget is in the film that you're doing, as an actor versus a stunt person, let them do their job. Let them, if they're a stunt person and they know their work and they know their job, let them step in. And another big thing that I've seen on sets is the director won't step down when the stunt director steps in. And they won't let them do the scene. And it's just like, but they choreographed it. They have to have the vision there for you. Yeah, you can get your angles together, but you can't direct the band on that moment. You got to step back.
Yeah.
And that is huge. I've seen where a lot of injuries have happened.
If you have a commander who's calling A, then B, then C, then D, and everyone's used to his tempo and his voice and his understanding, you can't go changing that in the last second. Let the stunt guy do the stunt guy stuff. That's why he's there.